What's up, everybody? It's your boy Ty. Today, we are going to be talking about the DCU, the brand new universe that is going to be brought upon us either next year or 2025 with Superman Legacy, but regardless, it's going to be here sooner than later. We're going to blink our eyes and we're going to be there. So, more specifically, I want to talk about what the DCU needs to do, what James Gunn needs to do, what everyone involved needs to do to ensure the success of this universe. Because quite honestly, we need to, fix the mistakes of what Marvel's been doing as of recently. And, Marvel's been kind of on the decline here. And now the DCU gets to learn from those mistakes and kind of, start fresh and do whatever they want. So as you guys know, with the failure of the DCEU, what was brought upon us? A reset. That reset being the DCU. Basically a copy of the MCU, just a fresh start on their universe. I mean, it barely even got kicked off in the first place. The DCEU was kind of lackluster, and I mean, those movies weren't rated too well. So Warner Brothers decided, hey, we're going to copy Marvel. We're going to get our Kevin Feige in James Gunn and Peter Safran, I don't know how to say his last name, but yeah, I mean, James Gunn's going to be more of the creative side of things. Peter Safran is going to be more of like the business side of things, like Kevin Feige. And yeah, that's when we got our legendary video, the last day of January. James Gunn said, in January, we're going to get announcements for the DCU. And right on the last day of January, we got our video announcing Chapter 1 of the DCU, or at least some of Chapter 1. That was very exciting for a lot of people, including people like me, who is a James Gunn fan, but isn't really a DCU fan, or DC fan, period. So I'm really excited to see what they're going to do. But see, that's the thing. How are we going to make sure this is a successful universe? What steps do they need to follow to make sure this runs smoothly, it's successful, they're making their money, all the fans are happy? I mean, that's the thing. We already have the MCU, but what's the DCU going to look like? I mean, that's what we're here to talk about today. See, the thing is, DC needs to learn from Marvel. That's going to be our first point here. Marvel's been doing this connected universe stuff for 15 years, as of the other day when it was the anniversary of the MCU with Iron Man. They need to learn. They need to look back and say, what mistakes has the MCU made that we can just completely resolve right now? Phase 1, I mean, yeah, things were a little bit slow because, they were just starting off. They didn't want to oversaturate the market, and they built up to the Avengers. Then from there, they got a little bit more experimental in Phase 2. Phase 3 was like you're coming towards this big conclusion. You're just doing banger after banger. Phase 4 is where I think the DCU can really learn from Marvel's mistakes. That we'll get into in a little bit, but I think that since James Gunn's already worked with Marvel, he'll be able to kind of take a step back, breathe, and look from outside of the box and say, what was Marvel doing wrong? Even though he was like producers on some of these movies, he could just admit, they were doing wrong in this area. They were doing wrong in this area. Look and just say, all right, let's try to fix that. I mean, in reality, the past 15 years, DC has been the little brother to Marvel. It's kind of like how Adidas is the little brother to Nike, They've always just been trying to keep up, but honestly, at the end of the day, one of them is just a big dog and the other one's just kind of treading behind, trying to follow in the footsteps. See, most of these points I'm about to say are kind of related to Marvel, so it's hard not to generalize them all in that category. But let's start with a problem that Phase 4 of Marvel went through that the DCU really needs to avoid if they want to be successful. That being oversaturation. See, the thing is, there's two sides to this. You could either be oversaturated, release way too much stuff, like in Phase 4 of Marvel, or you could be undersaturated and have your fans constantly wanting more stuff, almost like Star Wars, I would say, at least on the movie side of things. There's two sides of the spectrum. You need to find a beautiful sweet spot right in the middle. Going back to Marvel, because that's our biggest reference point. This is our second, superhero universe. Phase 4 had more content hour-wise than Phase 1, 2, and 3 combined. That is insane. That's almost hard to process. I mean, Phase 4 was like 2 years, and then before that, it was like 13 years of content. You're telling me in 2 years they put out more than they put out in 13. The DCU cannot do that. In that case, it's kind of like you're looking at it from a quantity over quality standpoint. You need to have that perfect balance of quality and quantity, but definitely, if anything, leaning more towards quality. I think that, yeah, they're going to be obviously incorporating shows into the DCU too. James Gunn already said there's going to be, multiple shows that he announced. Creature Commandos, we're getting a Green Lantern series. These are the types of things where, yeah, we want to kind of have a nice balance with the movies and the shows and just be able to look at the full stretch of the year and say, okay, we have like a movie here, a little gap, a show here, a little gap, a movie here. Maybe like 2 movies a year, 2 shows a year, I think that's like more than enough. Maybe 3 movies a year? I don't know. I don't want to go crazy. But Marvel is really going insane. I think a good balance would be something like 2 or 3 movies a year, 2 shows a year. I think that's more than enough, especially that they're just starting off. They just got to start really slow, and then they could build from there and kind of feel it out. Getting into our next topic, this is somewhat similar to oversaturation, but not necessarily of content, more of characters. I think one thing that I don't really see anybody talking about whenever they're talking about the MCU, I don't know if I'm the only person to realize this, but there are way too many characters in the MCU now. I know that a lot of them are likable for the most part, but when you really look at, especially, I know that we keep going back to Phase 4, that's when Marvel made most of their mistakes. They introduced so many characters with just lingering stories where you're like, okay, where is this going to go? How's this connected? There are so many side characters. I literally could be here for 10 minutes listing all these people from all these shows, all these movies, everything. There's so much stuff going on, and you just are not going to have enough time to explore that. You need to just focus on a certain amount of characters, maybe 15 characters, including side ones. Maybe we can even say 20 characters, including side characters. Focus in on those. Maybe over the course of, obviously a couple movies, a couple shows. But, Marvel's probably at almost 100 at this point. Maybe even 80 or 60. I don't know, but way more. Focus in on 20 characters. Have that be your base. Kill some off. Then bring some in. Keep an even, steady amount. Just don't oversaturate us with a ton of storylines, a ton of things that are just going to go nowhere. While we're on that topic of storylines going nowhere, I think the DCU just needs to have a perfect balance of 2 things. Individual stories and an overarching story. So obviously, you're going to have your movies, your shows, whatever, maybe your specials. So, starting with the movies, you want to have each movie have their own directorial flair, we could call it. Each director is doing their own thing. They have their style. They're having these really nice individual stories, movies that you could look at by themselves and say, hey, that was actually a really good movie. I don't want to see a bunch of movies that are just setting up the next movies. Then the movie that is set up is just setting up another movie. Then that movie is setting up another movie. And you see where I'm going with this. I don't want just a bunch of setup movies. You want to have good individual stories that, are focused on their own plot points, while also maybe just teasing at an overarching narrative. So you have movie, right? These 4 movies I have right here have their own storylines. But there's also something kind of going over it, which is leading us towards the end. The most obvious example of this, you could practically say the whole MCU Phase 1 to 3 was all leading towards Endgame. So important to have great stories, but in 2 different ways. Both individual and overarching. I feel like I said that word 10 times at this point, but you guys get the point. See, another thing that I really want to see, at least just to start things off, because I know you could get riskier down the line, but bring in people to this universe behind the cameras where they know what they're doing. We want to see these established directors, things of that nature, cinematographers, directors, writers, people that already have work to back up what, they can bring to the screen. I already saw that for Swamp Thing. James Mangold's going to be doing that. He has a great track record already of movies. James Gunn, he's the one that's doing Superman Legacy. He obviously makes great superhero movies. You don't want to just bring in some beginner, I feel like, for their first DCU movie, because quite honestly, you might risk messing up the universe slightly, or either casting the wrong people, you're just setting up a story that you just don't want to have to follow. I would almost say She-Hulk, how I can guarantee you that if Marvel could go back, they would pretend She-Hulk never happened. Now I feel like they're almost forced to continue that story just because they already made the show, even though it got terrible ratings, which was completely justifiable and warranted. But this is the thing. You just have to get people in there that know what they're doing, that have experience. It's not time to experiment in the first, chapter of things. That would be crazy. It's way too much risk, way too much on the line. See, when it comes to the material that we're looking at, I actually like that James Gunn decided to go with this riskier approach when it comes to what he's actually putting out there. Creature Commandos, The Authority, Booster Gold, even Waller, you could even say Peacemaker, Swamp Thing. These are pretty niche superheroes. It's almost like when we're looking back at Guardians of the Galaxy, no one was going into that oh yeah, I know who the Guardians of the Galaxy are for the comics. No, a mass audience doesn't know who they are. But if you create a good story with great characters that are well developed from great people behind the camera that are writing them and obviously directing them, you'll get a phenomenal movie and a phenomenal universe with characters you want to see interacting with each other from other movies, and just jumping from movie to movie and then having that big team up, and you're really excited to see them all together. That's what you want. You need to have trusted people behind the camera just to start off the universe. And yeah, that about wraps it for today. I think that my main point I want to make is that just look at Marvel and look at what they've done, look at their terrible mistakes, at least that they've been making as of recently, and learn from that. I mean, I know that I also said other stuff, but all the things that I've said are also mistakes that Marvel have made that you need to fix. I said, oh, don't have too many characters. Marvel has too many characters. Have trusted people behind the camera. Marvel's been having not trusted people behind the camera, and they've been putting out really bad stuff. You just need to make sure that you have an overarching story as well. Because Phase 4 had no overarching story. We had a bunch of random individual stories, and now I guess we have to follow up with all of them over the course of the next, I don't even know how many years. At the end of the day, I'm really excited for the DCU. But they just have to make sure that they take their time, they make sure they're making a quality product, and again, I know it seems like I just praised this guy to death, but you gotta trust James Gunn, and you gotta let him do his thing. I'm telling you guys, this is gonna be a really good universe. I can't wait for Creature Commandos to come out next year, because I think that's gonna be our first DCU product, at least I'm pretty sure, but yeah, I mean, that's about it for today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. I love all you guys, and I will see you in the next one.
You eat my enchilada! I thought we settled it! You eat my enchilada! I thought we settled this! You eat my enchilada! I thought we settled